political achievement, but before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies? One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates.
Bill Maher is taking aim at Democratic Socialists, and he's not holding back. The outspoken host criticizes the movement for pushing the Democratic Party toward what he yara as a risky socialist direction. His remarks are sharp, direct, and hard to ignore.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're Democratic Socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people...
Maher opens by targeting Bernie Sanders, a leading advocate of democratic socialism. Sanders has long promoted single-payer health care as a solution to America's system. But Maher points to Vermont, where such a plan struggled and ultimately collapsed due to high costs and complexity. To Maher, this failure highlights the gap between appealing ideas and real-world execution.
White people sometimes, I think, question some of what you're saying. This is a survey student loan forgiveness recipients. 73% of applicants say they are likely to spend their extra money on non-essential, including vacations, smartphone, drugs, and alcohol. They admitted that to the pollster.
Who is this pollster?
NBC News. 52% they are very likely to buy new clothing. 46% they would use the money for vacation and eat out at restaurants. This is why people have a thing about, I would never call it free.
Maher argues that when faced with criticism, Sanders often questions the source rather than addressing the broader concern. He claims many Americans still prefer capitalism, valuing flexibility, incentives, and personal control. In his view, overly generous systems without structure can lead to inefficiency, exposing a clash between idealism and human behavior.
You know, the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chávez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a mess. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its...
He expands his critique by pointing to countries like Venezuela, Cuba, and North Korea. Maher argues that heavy state control in these nations has led to economic struggles and limited freedoms. His message, when theory meets reality, outcomes are often far messier than promised.
I think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism. But the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing.
Maher acknowledges that America already blends capitalism with social safety nets. However, he warns that pushing too far toward democratic socialism could weaken innovation and productivity. He paints a picture of increased government control, reduced choice, and potential shortages if the balance shifts too far.
Either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
Rejecting democratic socialism outright, Maher emphasizes a system where hard work is rewarded. He argues that capitalism thrives on incentives, ownership, and the belief that effort leads to success. In his view, excessive redistribution risks lowering motivation and slowing progress.
Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in. In 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that.
Maher also issues a political warning. If Democrats align too closely with far-left policies, they could face trouble in future elections. He believes voters are often driven by moderation, not extremes, and that perception plays a crucial role in political success.
This election is taking place when we have an administration in Washington which every day is moving us toward an authoritarian society.
This is America, New York City. Don't let them tell you any different. Don't let them tell you that we are the exception. We are the rule. And we set the bar for America. I'm talking to you, Donald Trump.
Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. New York is not for sale!
Figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are seen as key voices in the Democratic Socialist movement. Maher argues that while such ideas may succeed in places like New York City, they may not resonate nationwide.
Mendami seems like a nice guy, and I congratulate him on an extraordinary political achievement. But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Meanwhile, Abigail Spanberger has taken a different approach, distancing herself from democratic socialism and appealing to moderates. Maher suggests this contrast shows that political strategies must adapt to different regions and voter bases.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a Democratic Socialist!
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong, moving to the.
In the end, Maher frames the debate as a clash between idealism and reality. By criticizing figures like Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, he warns that policies that sound good in theory may struggle in practice. His conclusion is simple: balance and public perception matter.